Hey everyone, welcome to the Mindful Journey podcast. I'm your host Sana, and this is the space where we slow down on purpose, breathe a little deeper, and talk about what it really takes to live and lead with intention. Today, we are exploring something that sounds corporate, but it is actually deeply personal: leadership. Not the title stuff, not the ego stuff, the real kind, the kind that shows up in your relationships, your decisions, your boundaries, and the way you treat yourself when nobody's watching. And listeners, my guest today is Jim Carlough. He is a seasoned strategist, speaker, and author of The Six Pillars of Effective Leadership, a roadmap to success. He has spent decades helping people build trust driven teams, reduce burnout, and also lead in a way that actually feels human. His core belief? Simple and kind of a mic drop. Leaders are not born, they are developed. So if you have ever thought that I'm not the leadership type, or even I'm trying to lead, but I'm exhausted, stay with us because this conversation is going to reframe what leadership looks like when it starts from integrity, compassion, stability, and yes, even humor. So, Jim, welcome to the Mindful Journey, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Glad to visit with you again. I always enjoy our conversation. So I hope today will be as engaging as it has in the past.
Absolutely, absolutely, Jim. And I really, really love it because we are diving into the six pillar leadership framework, and I'm very confident we'll be breaking it down in a way that is real and practical. So, listeners, if you're driving to work, walking your dog, or hiding from your inbox, this is for you. So, Jim, let us start at the top before we get tactical. What is the story behind your six pillar leadership framework? I mean, where did it come from, and why did you feel you had to turn it into a structured model instead of just another leadership pep talk?
There's a couple of I'll tell you how it started. For the last
Mm.
30 years, I've been doing a lot of mentoring of young managers and leaders. And consistently, I have found what we do, and we do it around the world, not just in the United States. But when it
Mhm.
comes time to find a new manager, most companies are not very good at succession planning and preparing future people for leadership. So when it comes
Mhm.
time to fill an opening, they generally will look at the highest performers that they have and take someone who is technically a superstar and put him in a management role and say good luck, and they just let them try to figure it out.
Mhm.
Nobody's really the difference between kind of myself and some of the other people who talk about leadership is yes, I can be inspiring, but I'm not going to talk about um, tactics or things or ideals or things like that. I'm actually creating a framework of the characteristics that have allowed me to lead teams to very high levels with very, very low turnover in attrition. Most companies have attrition rates somewhere between 8 and 15% or even higher. My attrition rate for my teams has always been under 5%. And
Wow.
a bigger cost for companies is the cost to replace an employee. It typically costs anywhere from 150 to 250% of that employee's annual salary in order to hire, train, and bring a new person on board. That's a lot of money. If you're talking a 100-person or 500-person company, we're talking millions of dollars a year that are thrown away because most people quit their job not because they're not happy with the work. It's that they don't buy into the leadership and they're not connected with leadership. So I try to solve that with my framework.
Exactly. And Jim, I do remember our last conversation on another one of our podcast, and this there was some really, I mean, mind-shocking anecdotes that you had shared, because generally, I mean, personally, if I can say, I see it very rare, in whether it's for startups or um, corporates or enterprises, it's very rare. And I think people often have this misconception, as you addressed in the origin story behind the six pillar leadership framework, that um, the main point or the main criteria, the absolute criteria, is just the individual talent or the deliverable or the numbers that they have achieved. I mean, that's not just the only criteria that makes you an effective leader or an effective manager. So yeah, I mean, 5% is absolutely. I mean, it's rare, Jim. I'll be really honest from my end. I don't know about the listeners, but for me, it's rare.
And when you think back and you look at it, when you realize that most people quit jobs because of a disconnect with leadership, that's all something that's fixable. And recently, someone called me the leadership identity maker, or the leadership architect, because I'm giving people the tools that will allow them to excel and really connect with their employees. And if we just jump into that, the very first pillar that I tell people is non-negotiable. And it's something that's lacking in this country and in many places around the world. And that's integrity. If a leader doesn't operate with full transparency and absolute integrity 100% of the time, there is no way possible for their team to ever grow and trust that leader. And the moment trust is broken, the psychological safety that that employee may have felt before is gone. And the ability to kind of regain that is virtually impossible to regain. And it's interesting. I've actually led my life pretty much by the integrity kind of mindset. And it really hit me in 1983, the year I graduated college, which makes me very old. So let's not discuss age. But I had run for a local political position in the town I grew up in, and I won. And shortly after winning in the election, the city manager asked me to sit down with him and have a chat. And we sat down, and he asked me to do a favor for him that changed my entire world. I sat there and he said, "What I want you to do is every night when you put your head on the pillow and right before you close your eyes, I want you to ask yourself one question. And that question is, did I do anything today for my own personal self benefit that was at the expense of another individual, group of individuals, or organization?" And he said, if you say yes to that question, before you go to sleep, you have to do two things. You have to, number one, immediately how to figure out how to unwind that decision. And two, you have to figure out how to never do it again. And when I pondered that for a second, it was like a brick hitting me on the side of the head. But what it did is it really set me out on a life-changing kind of platform where integrity drives everything that I do, whether it's business or whether it's family. So these six pillars are not just for the business world. They're for the chef in the kitchen. They're for the principal at a school. They're for a stay-at-home mom. These are all these are all different podcasts that have invited me to be on them because they struggle with some of these soft skills that really we all need to make the world a better place.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more with you, Jim, on this, because not only we are leading people or it's applicable in the workplaces, but also we have to, before becoming a good leader for others, I think we have to begin from a place where we can lead ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, listeners, if you are enjoying the mindful journey, take 2 seconds to follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. It helps the show reach more people who need a softer, steadier space to land. And if he can leave a quick review, it seriously make a difference. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Jim, one question comes to my mind, in terms of, okay, accountability. We will definitely uncover the 6 pillars, but before that, I have a question because this is something that I see commonly to say, for a lack of better word, that when we are, working with our managers or leaders, there's this fear of questioning back what they are doing or they are proposing or they are implementing, because sometimes it can really feel for us that we are questioning their capability or their efficiency. So have you had encountered such scenarios, and if yes, then how exactly would you suggest to navigate such kind of scenarios? Is it the responsibility of the person who is led to make sure that they're not questioning the intentions in there, or a leader should be better equipped with, understanding that yes, I'm also human and I can be wrong, or maybe I can make mistakes, and I'm definitely accountable for that, because this is something that kind of becomes like this uh, messy, sometimes very very confusing, and can lead to a lot of miscommunication, misunderstanding.
Absolutely. When I think back to the early 80s, my first management job, it was still somewhat the management style of the 70s and 60s, which was very authoritarian, where you didn't question your leader.
Yep.
But that doesn't exist anymore. Leaders today, and I'm the first one to tell my teams, we're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes, but we're going to learn from those mistakes, recover from those mistakes, and we're not going to repeat those mistakes. And if when a leader tells their team that they make mistakes, it will diffuse the stress and anxiety they may have about being fearful of making mistakes. Now, making a mistake once a year or twice a year is one thing, but making a mistake every day is a learning problem,
Mhm.
which potentially has to be dealt with, unfortunately, or a capacity to learn problem. But in today's world, collaboration is really the key. Collaboration, communication, um, having that trusted relationship to give the psychological safety to the employee to allow them to even approach a leader. I know many leaders from my career who were not approachable. And if I
Mhm.
tried to approach them, they were like grumpy or didn't want to talk or whatever. And to me, that's poor leadership. A leader needs to be with their people, needs to understand their people. And the most important thing as a leader is I need to be able to recognize when one of my employees is having a bad or off day. And that's when I need to interject and try to figure out how I can help them. Because if I don't do that, their productivity for that day and subsequent days are going to suffer. And that's where compassion and empathy come into play. Because if I can understand what's going on in the employee's mind or life, I can help them or guide them to fix that so that we can get back to the normal state of mind and also state of productivity. And so to me, a leader who sits behind a door, closed door, 8 hours a day is not able to visualize when their employee is struggling or having a problem and when to know when to interject and to try to find a way to help them through their whatever issue they're having, whether it's a sick child at home, a sick spouse, or a sick pet or animal or whatever. If you don't take that action, you're not going to change that behavior the next day, if that makes sense.
It does. It does, Jim. It does. Okay. Okay. So, Jim, let's begin with uncovering all the 6 pillars here. If you can give us a glimpse, um, and not only just the 6 pillars, but how exactly they can be, um, executed, because we have got books, we have got podcasts, we have got so many resources. When, let's say, if I wish to become a good leader, I have so many resources to check. But um if we can also like help us understand whether these six pillars can actually kind of become a substitute for that.
Um,
Yeah. Mhm.
absolutely. So I'm going to go through, I'll tell you the six pillars. We'll talk a little bit about each one of them.
Yeah.
When you hear them and you think about them, they're very, very different than if you pick up a book from John Maxwell or Simon Sinek or any of those other um, influential leadership coaches and speakers. These are soft based skills that they don't teach you in business school. They don't teach you at Harvard. They don't teach you at Wharton. And it starts with integrity. Integrity is the non negotiable pillar, always doing the same thing, always going down the middle of the road, ensuring that you're putting others first and not yourself.
Mm.
Then we have integrity and then we have compassion and empathy, being able to understand where our employees are suffering and be able to interject and help them. That's a tough thing for people to learn. And again, it's hard to teach empathy and compassion. You have to live it. And you don't live that in business school, and they don't give you exercises on that. And so in the framework, I give you ways to implement these things, which makes me a little bit different as well compared to the other things that are out there in the market. Next is focus and stability. If we think about that, focus is really keeping our eye on what's happening. And there's an old story about Jeff Bezos when he first started Amazon back in the mid 90s. They were struggling as they were growing with a very poor reputation for customer service. And instead of him going to the leader of the customer service area, who was another executive, and saying, "You need to fix this," Jeff went and put a desk in the middle of the floor and just sat there for 6 months, listening, observing, watching, taking notes. And then he went back to the leader of the customer service department and he said, "Okay, we need to evolve. And here's how we're going to change. And this is what we're going to do." That's focus. The other thing that people need is stability in their leader. And stability is being able to behave and act and speak the same way regardless of the situation. Whether it's a heated discussion or a non-heated discussion, the leader's voice should not be, higher or lower than the other, and they certainly shouldn't be screaming. And
Mm.
I'll give you an example. If this is my normal voice every day, and tomorrow there's a trash can that starts on fire, and I start screaming at everybody to run and hide or do whatever, they're not going to look at me as a leader. They're going to look at me as being panicked and not knowing what to do. And so they look to our leader no different than if you were a military soldier looking to or your sergeant or general for direction or protection. That's what we have to provide. We have to provide that psychological and physical safety for our employees. And when you tie those six things together, you create a significant, not only organization, but an organization that truly believes in the mission that you're going to accomplish or work through. And they're going to follow you with a passion to get it done. Absent those characteristics, what you have is a team that's going to have turnover of 10 to 15% or more every year. You're going to have an identity issue with the leader who's running that organization. And it's not going to be able to fix itself on its own until you change the leadership or you change the identity of that leader through something like the framework of the six pillars. And that's what makes what I talk about very, very different. I can I can give people an easy way to implement all of these things. And I do that actually in my book and I do that in my workshops and I help people work through it. None of these things can you pick up a book and read and say, "Okay, I got it. I got to do this differently tomorrow."
Mm.
These are things that you actually have to live out and be front of mind in everything that you do. And it has to be front of mind both at work, at home, and when you go to the grocery store, because a leader if you're in the grocery store and you see one of your employees, they're going to expect to interact with you. And you need to be the same person that you are when you're at the office. And so these pillars transcend every aspect of our lives. And I think that's what's very, very different about my approach is everyone else talks theory. I talk practical application, and I can make a difference.
Hmm. I absolutely agree. And Jim, you know, you mentioned, this trust and accountability. Let's start with that. Let's these two pillars, they sound great in theory, but in practice, they can really, really feel like a tug of war. So, how does your six pillar framework help a leader balance being human first while still driving hard results? Especially when the business is under pressure, because it can really feel very difficult, individually to navigate through all of this.
It it's not easy to implement because you're changing your entire mindset to how to what you believed previously or thought you were taught previously or not taught previously, and
Mhm.
make it more human centric. But what it does is it's going to humanize you. The last pillar, which we haven't talked about, is humor. And someone asked me, "Well, what do you mean about humor?" And when I talk humor, I don't talk being the stand-up comedian at the water cooler at 10 a.m. every morning telling jokes, but being able to use humor to humanize the leader themselves. And so the employees can understand that, hey, I'm human. So a lot of the humor that I use, and I use it to diffuse tense situations. I use it to refocus people at meetings. I use it to make sure that, messages are getting through. But a lot of times it's humor that's self-deprecating and pointing at myself, which if I can laugh at the stupid things that I do, I would expect my employees to be able to laugh. And when they realize that I'm no different than they are, it makes they can see that I'm approachable. It's not just saying to them, hey, I'm approachable, I'm here whenever you want. It's demonstrating that by enjoying a good laugh with them. And so humor really kind of ties it all together. And you don't need to take a comedy class for that. I mean, we can all find funny things in our lives that have happened that we can use as reference. And I'm very cautious that people don't take humor the wrong way. Humor is never directed at another individual. You're never directing that humor at somebody's religious or ethnic background. Not at all. That's 40 years ago. No, humor today is at the funny things that happen every day. It's me walking into the door without opening it. It's me, tripping on the sidewalk or something like that. But it's things that are that happen in our lives day to day that allow us to laugh in retrospect. Maybe at the moment we didn't laugh, but it certainly was funny, and we can use that to help soften the conversation with our employees.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. And it can also be quite tricky because humor is never objective. Um, but I think it's a very good way to, kind of we say break the ice, or at least make conversations which are human, not just technical or robotic. That
Cor-
but you have to do this, you have to do that, and that's it. End of the conversation, end of the day.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely correct.
Yeah. Um. And yeah, Jim, you can continue with all the pillars here. Yeah.
So, when I think of stability, and
Mhm.
we'll go back to that one for a second. I think of Warren Buffett.
Okay.
Whenever you see Warren Buffett, his language and the way he speaks is always the same. Every company he's ever purchased has followed the exact same process. He's been doing the same thing since he was 12 years old with buying stock. And that stability is what our employees are looking to have from us. And so ensuring that we're not running around like somebody that doesn't know what's going on or always in a panic or always in a rush is going to create a sense of stress amongst the employee population. And so as you look at the 6 pillars, it's also important to look at the negative side of it, that if I don't have stability, what is that outcome? Well, what happens is that stability, the lack of stability is going to create concern within the employee ranks because they're going to see someone who's potentially unstable. Now, I don't say unstable in a bad way, but I mean, it's just not operating consistently. I mean, no different than focus. I mean, focus, nothing bad is going to happen if you don't focus well, but you probably aren't going to meet your results that you're hoping for because you're not always focused on the same thing day in and day out. But I also think in addition to integrity being very hard to develop and learn, I think compassion and empathy are equally difficult.
Right.
It's those it is it's easy to learn, it's hard to implement because a leader who has had difficulty with empathy and compassion will feel uneasy at first being able to deliver empathy and compassion. I mean, the same goes true for integrity. If the leader has operated with poor integrity historically, getting around that is going to take a significant amount of investment of time to prove to the employees that they are a different leader today and that their leadership identity has in fact changed.
Hmm. Yeah, I absolutely believe that, even if the times have changed, I think these pillars, they stand the test of the time. And I think it also eliminates this huge misconception around, quote unquote, soft skills, that compassion and empathy, they are not an important part of a leader's characteristics, or they help in building a character. Um, and another, kind of very personal question, Jim, that comes to my mind is, okay, let's say I have understood, or in fact, I have begun the process of understanding, absorbing these 6 pillars of leadership. Now, I feel that maybe I need more guidance, or I may need more, kind of a mentoring on how to get these implemented in my day to day, situations or decisions that I'm taking. Do you feel that I need someone else's help who has done it or been there in that position, maybe for any specific, pillar? Let's say for someone who has actually, um, you know, gotten some great results out of implementing compassion and empathy or integrity in leadership, or I can, do it, just like a self help.
So I truly believe in mentoring. I'm a huge believer in mentoring. And having
Mm.
done it for so long, I could probably call myself the future mentor for everybody. Um,
Okay.
I don't have that kind of bandwidth, but I do believe in it. And in fact, in my workshops, I do give um, mentoring to the attendees of any of my workshops for a set period of time with a once meeting just to review where they're at, where their struggles are, or whatever, and to help them get beyond that.
Mhm.
Changing your identity is hard, right? Most people step into management in their mid-20s to mid-30s, and their their platform or their identity is pretty much intact. Now, what I'm talking about is transforming that identity into a really humanistic leadership approach that's going to help them grow and develop not just themselves, but everybody around them much quicker. And it will also solve the attrition problem. It'll also solve the succession problem because
Mm.
people will see how you operate and will start to follow that. And then those become the future leaders, which I think we have to invest more in as we move forward. We've kind of gotten away from that in some areas.
Exactly. Exactly. And also, this, your core belief is that leaders are not born, they're developed. Now, That statement, uh, it may trigger people because, a lot of us, even including myself as well, Jim, shouldn't be lying that, I also sometimes believe that leadership is a personality type. But there's a caveat here that I used to believe that somebody who is strong-willed, aggressive, strong-headed, kind of has that aura is fit to be a good leader. From your perspective, what are the biggest myths you see about natural leadership, and how does your six pillar framework break those myths in real life?
So it's true that scientists have found a gene that when you measure the population in this gene, there's a lot of people, or a fair number of, or a fair percentage of people in leadership that have that genotype. However, if that's the case, and we believe leaders are born that way, how do you explain my success? I don't come from a family of executive leaders. My dad was a carpenter. His dad was a mason. My great grandfather was a chicken farmer. There's no CEO or chief revenue officer or, senior executive in any of those three, or me being the fourth generation of, of people. So if leadership is something you were born with, where did where did I get it from? And I can truly tell you it's been self-developed. I have evolved over the years. I've been very blessed to have worked with some great leaders. I worked with Ross Perot for almost a decade at Pro Systems, and he was probably one of the most profound and fabulous leaders I've ever seen, and he cared. That's where I really learned empathy and compassion, was working at Pro Systems, where he cared about the health and welfare of every single one of his employees. And you don't see that today. I mean, if we had an employee who was seriously ill, or had an employee who had a family member that was seriously ill, a spouse or child, we would do anything we could to help that family out. And we would have to report it to his office and let him know what we were doing to help that family in that situation. And it wasn't just for 1 day or 2 days. It could be for 6 months. And he created an organization of tremendous followers. People would, if he was a general in the army, he he built an organization that performed like the Marines. He always said, look, when somebody hires us, they expect us to parachute in like the Marines, do the job, and extricate and get out of there and move on to the next mission. And and in order to get people to believe in that, they have to believe in themselves, and they have to believe in leadership to be able to perform that way. And a lot of what I talk about really resonates back from that Perot systems culture. Um, and I have never worked for an organization prior or since that had that kind of culture.
Wow. That is really, I think the proof is in the pudding, Jim. Wonderful, wonderful. Before we wrap up, Jim, I'm very sure, especially all our founders and entrepreneurs and all the future leaders who are listening to this conversation, they would like to get access to more wisdom and, of course, your book, Six Pillars of Leadership, a Roadmap for Success. So, for that, what would be the easiest way for them to reach out?
So they can, a couple of things. Number one, my book is available worldwide on Amazon. So that's number one. It is called The Six Pillars of Effective Leadership, a Roadmap to Success. They can also reach out to me on my website, which is just jimcarlough.com. So it's JIMCARLOUGH.com. I'm confident you'll have that in the show notes. You can email me through there, or send me a message through the website, or email me at jim@jimcarlough.com. Those are all, or social media. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. There are other Jim Carlos in the world, but there's only one that does this.
Definitely, definitely. And to make all the things easier, listeners, for all of you, I'll have all the links and details in the show notes. So just hover over to them along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And I believe, I mean, this has been such a solid breakdown, listeners, because we talked about 6 pillars, we talk about vision, accountability, trust, compassion, empathy, adaptability. And of course, in order to get a better glimpse and peek into this, you have to check out Jim's book and all the resources that he's sharing. But we really dug into the real tension between being human and driving results. We also challenged the idea of the born leader. And I think most importantly, Jim, you reminded us that leadership is not reserved for people with fancy titles or extrovert personalities. I think that is something that also personally I'm going to definitely retain with me. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome. I'm glad to be here, and I look forward to hearing from your audience. If they have a question, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to subscribe. I've been meaning to start a newsletter, and I'm going to start it in the new year. So feel free to sign up for that on my website.
Absolutely. That's super, super great. So I encourage all of our listeners also keep a look on Jim's newsletter for the new year. And also thank you to everyone for tuning into Biz Blend. Thank you so much, listeners, for hanging out with us today. If this episode made you rethink how you show up as a leader, share it with one person who needs to hear that they are not stuck with the leader they are today. Hit follow, leave a review if you found value today, and as always, keep building businesses that are not just profitable, but sustainable and human. I'm your host, Splend. I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you.